It was an ordinary summer afternoon at the neighborhood swimming pool until an unexpected encounter flipped the script. A white woman approached a young black teenager at the entrance, challenging his right to be there. What started as a simple question quickly spiraled out of control, drawing the attention of everyone around. The heated exchange escalated, the words sharper and more accusatory, with the crowd growing larger as tension soared. Just as things seemed to be on the brink of eruption, something surprising happened. A sleek black sports car pulled up to the entrance, its arrival impossible to ignore. The moment the door swung open, the identity of the person stepping out sent a ripple of shock through the crowd, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The next few moments would not only reshape the course of that afternoon, but would challenge everything the witnesses thought they knew about power, justice, and perception. Stick around to find out how this encounter turns the tables, and, trust me, you won't want to miss it. If you're intrigued, like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more thought-provoking stories. Jaden Brooks was a 14-year-old with an air of quiet assurance. Thoughtful and respectful, he had a natural athleticism that made him stand out without trying. His presence exuded a calm confidence, and he was the kind of person people gravitated toward, even if he didn't say much. Jaden had only recently moved into the neighborhood with his mother, Mayor Elise Brooks, a woman who had made history for her unwavering fairness and strong commitment to justice. For Jaden, this move meant more than just a new home. It was a chance to enjoy a carefree summer, make new friends, and settle into a place where he could finally feel at ease. On this particular day, Jaden walked toward the community pool, swim gear in hand, eager to dive in and soak up the simple joys of summer. He wasn't just looking forward to the water. It was the idea of being a teenager, blending in with the neighborhood, and embracing this fresh start. But his afternoon of relaxation was about to be upended by something completely unexpected. Nearby, Helen Mercer stood watching, a woman in her late 50s, who had earned a certain reputation around the neighborhood. To some, she was just a longtime resident who liked to keep an eye on things, but for others, she was known as an overbearing figure, someone quick to make assumptions and even quicker to judge those who didn't fit into her limited view of what belonged in the community. Helen often took it upon herself to challenge anyone she felt didn't meet her standards for who was worthy of being part of the neighborhood. And when she saw Jaden, she didn't waste any time in acting on her assumptions. Around them, the sounds of the pool carried the essence of a typical summer afternoon. Children's laughter echoed as they splashed in the water. Parents lounged under umbrellas, and lifeguards, more interested in their phones than their duties, half-heartedly kept watch. At first, the exchange between Helen and Jaden went unnoticed by most. It started off innocuously, enough a simple question, a quick glance. But as Helen's words grew sharper, and her tone more insistent, the subtle shift in the atmosphere didn't go unnoticed. Bystanders began to glance over, curiosity flickering in their eyes as the situation started to escalate, but no one stepped in to intervene. At first, the scene might have appeared as just another misunderstanding, a brief moment of tension that would soon dissipate. But as the minutes passed, it became apparent that this was turning into something much more profound. Jaden, calm and composed, stood his ground, refusing to back down. Helen, resolute in her beliefs, continued to press, determined to impose her view on the situation. What had started as a simple summer afternoon was rapidly evolving into a defining moment, a test of character for everyone involved, in an unsettling revelation of the uncomfortable truths lurking within the community. After school, Jaden made his way to the community pool, the golden rays of the late afternoon sun casting a soft glow over the sparkling water and the neatly landscaped grounds. This was his first visit to the pool, and he had heard from his new friends that it was one of the best spots in the area. He was eager to check it out and relax, taking in the joy of a quiet, carefree summer day. The scent of chlorine mixed with the sounds of children laughing and the rhythmic splashes of swimmers created a lively yet peaceful atmosphere. Jaden walked through the gate, a towel draped over his shoulder and a smile on his face, looking forward to the experience. But before he could even take a step toward the water, Helen Mercer, seated nearby, noticed him. She was a fixture of the neighborhood, always watching, always observing. The moment her gaze landed on Jaden, her expression tightened. She didn't recognize him, and to Helen, that was all the reason she needed to grow suspicious. Rising from her seat, she approached him with a sense of purpose, her movements calculated, her posture rigid. Her voice cut through the air with sharp authority. "Excuse me, young man. Who are you?" Jaden turned, surprised but polite. "Oh, hi, ma'am. I'm Jaden. I just moved here with my mom a few weeks ago." Helen's eyes narrowed, her skepticism palpable. "Moved here? Where exactly?" "I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and I've never seen you before." Jaden hesitated for a moment, his composure wavering just slightly. "We live just down the street, ma'am. I'm just here to swim." But Helen wasn't satisfied. Her tone shifted, sharp and accusatory. "I don't think so. This pool is for residents only. Do you have an ID proof that you live here?" Jaden blinked, bewildered by the sudden demand. "I didn't bring an ID. I just came to swim. I live on Maple Drive, if that helps." Helen crossed her arms tightly, her expression becoming more rigid. "Maple Drive? Well, if you live there, you should have no problem showing proof. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Around them, the poolside buzz began to quiet as people took notice. Parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of how to respond to the growing tension. The lifeguards shifted uncomfortably on their chairs, aware of what was happening but clearly hesitant to intervene. Jaden stood his ground, trying to remain calm despite the rising tension. "Ma'am, I don't know what else to say. This is my neighborhood too. I just want to swim." But Helen wasn't backing down. Her voice grew louder, drawing more and more attention. "If you live here, then prove it. Otherwise, you have no business being here. This is private property, and we don't allow just anyone to walk in." Jaden glanced around, hoping someone would step in, but no one did. The lifeguards still seated looked, as though they were considering whether to intervene, but in the end, they chose to remain silent, watching the exchange unfold, without offering a word. The tension in the air was palpable thick, oppressive as Helen continued her relentless questioning. It wasn't just the words she was using, it was the way she was saying them. Her tone carried an unspoken message, one that Jaden could feel deep in his chest. His pulse quickened, the frustration bubbling up inside him. But he refused to let her see it. "I'm not here to cause any trouble, ma'am," Jaden said, his voice steady, though there was an undeniable firmness behind it. "I'm just here to enjoy the pool, like everyone else." But Helen's response came swiftly and dismissively. "Then show me you belong here. Otherwise I'll have to get the management involved." Or worse. At her words, a murmur rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. People whispered quietly among themselves, their faces filled with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Yet, no one spoke up. No one stood up to intervene. What had started as a simple disagreement had now escalated into something much larger, a public standoff with Jaden standing alone against Helen's ceaseless questioning. While he maintained his composure, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. As Helen's voice grew louder, so too did the attention of everyone around the pool. Some onlookers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces betraying the discomfort they felt. Others remained silent, their faces neutral, but their lack of action spoke volumes in its own way. In the midst of it all, Jaden stood alone. His calm exterior was beginning to crack, the pressure of the situation wearing him down. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, before speaking again, his words more measured but still full of frustration. "Ma'am, I don't know what more I can say. My mom and I moved here recently. I live just a few streets over." Helen wasn't backing down. Her voice was sharp and cutting as she reached for her phone, the sound of her fingers pressing the keys slicing through the air. "Enough. If you're not going to prove you live here, I'm calling security. This pool isn't open to the public." The murmurs among the crowd grew louder, rippling like a wave. Some people fidgeted in their seats, glancing around awkwardly or whispering to those beside them. A few seemed to silently agree with Helen, nodding as if she was doing the neighborhood a favor by protecting its exclusivity. Yet others looked uneasy, their faces betraying quiet disapproval of the situation, but still, no one stepped forward. Jaden clenched his fists at his sides, his mind racing. He knew better than to let his emotions take over or raise his voice, though every inch of him burned with humiliation. Instead, he held his ground, speaking evenly, despite the growing tension. "You don't need to call anyone. I'm not trespassing. I live here." But Helen was already on the phone, speaking with exaggerated urgency, her words cold and deliberate. "Hello, yes, this is Helen Mercer. I'm at the community pool, and there's an unauthorized person here. I think you'd better send someone down right away." The words hit Jaden like a physical blow. Unauthorized person. He scanned the crowd, hoping someone might step in and vouch for him, but the faces around him remained stone-cold silent. The lifeguard, still perched on their high chair, glanced down nervously, but didn't say a word, keeping their gaze averted as if trying to avoid becoming involved. Minutes later, 2 security guards arrived. They walked briskly through the gates, their presence drawing even more attention. One of them, a tall man with a clipboard in hand, approached Jaden with an air of authority. "We've had a report of someone trespassing," he said, his voice firm. "Can you tell us your name and why you're here?" Jaden took a deep breath, steadying himself. His heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to show any sign of weakness. This moment wasn't going to define him, not here, not now. "I'm Jaden Brooks," he said calmly, looking directly at the security guard. "I'm here to swim. I live in the neighborhood with my mom. Maple Drive. My name is Jaden Brooks. I live in this neighborhood. I'm just here to swim." The guard raised an eyebrow, quickly glancing at Helen, who stood nearby with her arms crossed, a smug expression spreading across her face. "Do you have proof of residency? An ID, a pool pass?" Jaden shook his head, the frustration bubbling inside him. "I didn't bring anything. I just came here straight after school. I live on Maple Drive with my mom." The second guard, shorter and stockier, chimed in with a tone that matched Helen's. "Without proof, we can't verify that you belong here. Do you have anyone who can confirm your residency?" Jaden nodded quickly, desperate to resolve the situation. "I can call my mom. She's at work right now." But Helen interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh please," she said, clearly enjoying the power in the moment. "If he lived here, he wouldn't have such a hard time proving it." The first guard hesitated, his eyes shifting between Helen and Jaden. The teenager's distress was obvious, but the guards seemed reluctant to challenge the confidence in Helen's voice. Jaden could feel the weight of every gaze on him. The silence was deafening, and the whispers among the bystanders grew louder. He could hear snippets of conversation, voices murmuring things he couldn't quite catch, but it didn't matter. It felt like the whole pool was turning against him. He pulled out his phone, his hands trembling slightly, and began texting his mom. He wasn't sure what else to do. The message was short, but it felt like the longest one he'd ever typed. "Mom, can you come to the pool? There's a problem." The seconds that followed felt like hours. Helen watched Jaden closely, a satisfied smirk on her face as she crossed her arms, daring him to find a way out of the situation. The guards continued their questioning, their tones softer but still insistent. "Without proof," the taller guard said, glancing down at Jaden, "we may have to ask you to leave until this can be sorted out." Jaden opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, something shifted in the atmosphere. A sleek black luxury car pulled up just outside the pool area, its polished exterior gleaming under the afternoon sun. The sound of the car door opening cut through the murmurs of the crowd, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Heads turned instinctively, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected arrival. Jaden froze, his phone still in his hand, the message to his mom unfinished. He knew that car. He knew exactly who was stepping out of it. In that instant, the tension in the pool area reached a breaking point. The car door opened, and Mayor Elise Brooks stepped out. Her presence was magnetic, instantly drawing every gaze in the area. Dressed impeccably in her work attire, she exuded an aura of authority and control. Her expression was calm but resolute, and the click of her heels against the pavement seemed to echo through the still air as she made her way toward the pool deck. The security guards straightened up immediately, recognizing her. A few bystanders, who had been silent up until this point, exchanged wide-eyed glances, sensing the shift in power. Even Helen Mercer, who had been so confident moments before, took an uneasy step back, her smug demeanor faltering as she watched the scene unfold. Governor Clayton stopped just a few feet from the group, her gaze moving deliberately from the security guards to Helen before finally settling on her son. With a quiet confidence, she placed a reassuring hand on Jaden's shoulder, grounding him in the moment. Then, she turned to the gathering, her presence commanding attention. Her voice was measured, calm, but it carried an unmistakable weight. "What seems to be the problem here?" A beat of silence. "And why is my son being treated like a criminal?" Helen's face went pale, her smug composure cracking under the governor's sharp, unwavering gaze. She opened her mouth to respond but stumbled over her words. I didn't know he was your son. I was just trying to make sure everything was in order here." Governor Clayton raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "In order," she repeated, her tone cutting through Helen's stammering like a blade. And what exactly gave you the authority to interrogate a teenager at a public pool? My son is a resident of this neighborhood. He has every right to be here without being harassed. The taller security guard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Governor Clayton, we were just responding to a call. There was a concern about— She turned her attention to the guards, her voice still calm but growing sharper. A concern about what exactly? A teenager swimming in his community pool. Did you ask for his side of the story, or did you assume that the call alone justified your actions? The guards exchanged nervous glances, neither of them willing to answer directly. Helen, now visibly trembling, attempted to regain some of her footing. I didn't mean any harm, she said quickly, her words tumbling out. I just didn't recognize him, and I thought— You thought what? Governor Clayton interrupted, her voice now carrying an unmistakable edge. That he didn't belong here because you didn't recognize him. That his presence required proof while everyone else's didn't. She gestured to the other pool-goers who were now watching silently, many avoiding eye contact. Helen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, her confidence shattered under the weight of Governor Clayton's words. Governor Clayton turned back to the security guards, her expression unwavering. I'd like to remind you both that this pool is governed by the same laws that apply everywhere else in this state. That includes laws against discrimination. My son is a resident here, and he deserves the same respect and freedom to enjoy this facility as anyone else. Do I make myself clear? Both guards nodded quickly, their voices small as they muttered affirmations. Yes, ma'am. Of course, Governor. Then, Governor Clayton's gaze shifted back to Helen, her expression softening just a little, though her tone remained firm. And as for you, Miss Harrington, Helen replied, her voice tight, I'd suggest taking some time to reflect on why you felt the need to escalate this situation the way you did. Because from where I'm standing, this looks a lot less like concern, and a lot more like bias. Helen looked as though she wanted to disappear. Her face flushed, and her hands fidgeted nervously. She nodded stiffly, her eyes never meeting the governor's. Satisfied, Governor Clayton turned back to Jaden, her expression softening as she placed a comforting arm around his shoulders. Her voice lowered, now full of warmth. You okay, Jaden? Jaden nodded, the tension in his face beginning to ease as he leaned into his mother's reassurance. Yeah, Mom, I'm fine now. The crowd remained silent, the gravity of the moment hanging thick in the air. Governor Clayton had not only diffused the situation with quiet authority, but also left a lasting impression on everyone present. As Governor Clayton and Jaden turned to leave, the silence around the pool was broken by the hesitant voice of one of the security guards. Governor Clayton, he said, stepping forward, his face etched with regret. I want to apologize. We handled this poorly, and I'm sorry for the distress caused to your son. We should have listened and approached this differently. The second guard nodded in agreement, his voice subdued. We'll review our protocols to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Governor Clayton paused for a moment, her gaze steady but calm. Apologies are a start, she said, her tone firm yet constructive. But what matters more is action. Take this as an opportunity to reflect and improve, not just today, but every day moving forward. As the guards nodded, visibly humbled, murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. A parent seated by the pool spoke up, their voice tinged with guilt. I should have stepped in earlier. I saw what was happening, but I didn't say anything. I'm sorry, Jaden. Another bystander chimed in, their voice resolute. This isn't right. No one should have to go through that to enjoy a day at the pool. The murmurs grew louder, a collective expression of disapproval aimed at Helen Mercer, who stood awkwardly off to the side, her face flushed with embarrassment. She fidgeted with her bag, avoiding eye contact with everyone around her. Without a word, Helen turned and began gathering her things. Her shoulders slumped as she hurriedly left the pool area. The disapproving stares and whispered conversations followed her, her exit as uncomfortable as the moment that had led to it. The crowd, once silent, had now found its voice. The lifeguard, who had remained on the sidelines throughout the entire incident, climbed down from their chair and approached Jaden and Governor Clayton, their face a mixture of regret and determination. I should have said something sooner, the lifeguard admitted, their voice heavy with guilt. This is on me too. I promise I'll make sure no one else ever has to go through something like this again. I'll report this and push for better training for everyone here. Governor Clayton nodded, her expression softening just a bit. Acknowledging the issue is the first step, she said. But understand, this isn't just about policies, it's about people. It's about recognizing our own biases and having the courage to speak up when we see something wrong. She turned to address the crowd, her voice steady and commanding, yet filled with compassion. We all have a responsibility to ensure that our community is welcoming to everyone, regardless of their background. What happened today wasn't just an unfortunate mistake. It's a reminder that we must constantly work to make sure no one feels out of place, no matter where they're from or how they look. This is not just about following rules, it's about doing what's right. The crowd fell silent, but this time, it was a silence of reflection, a collective understanding that something meaningful had shifted in the atmosphere. Governor Clayton's gaze swept across the group one last time. Let's be better. For all of us. With those final words, she turned to Jaden, offering him a reassuring smile. Together, they walked away from the pool, their presence leaving behind a lingering sense of change. A subtle yet powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what's right. This is a teachable moment for all of us. Governor Clayton's voice rang out clearly, her words sinking deep into the crowd. Discrimination, whether overt or subtle, has no place here or anywhere else. It's not enough to avoid doing harm. We have a responsibility to actively stand against injustice when we see it. Silence enables these situations to happen. Action prevents them. The bystanders, many of whom now looked visibly moved, nodded in agreement. A few even clapped softly, their applause gradually growing as others joined in. The sound of it was both reassuring and powerful, a quiet declaration of support for what was right. Jaden stood quietly by his mother's side, his initial distress replaced by a quiet pride. Though the day had been difficult, there was something deeply grounding in the way his mother had handled the situation, and in the way the community was beginning to respond. As they walked away from the pool, the energy in the air had shifted. What had started as a moment of confrontation had evolved into an opportunity for reflection and change. While the day had been far from what Jaden had hoped for, he left with the assurance that he wasn't alone and that his mother's strength in the awakening of the community had turned a painful experience into a step toward something better. Jaden and his mother walked side by side as they exited the pool area, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the pavement. Jaden held his head high, his shoulders no longer weighed down by the tension of the ordeal. His mother's reassuring presence beside him seemed to say everything he needed to hear, that he was seen, heard, and protected. As they reached their car, Governor Clayton placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder and looked at him with a quiet smile. "You handled yourself with dignity today," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "I'm proud of you." Jaden nodded, a smile beginning to form on his face. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." As the silence hung in the air, the weight of the day slowly began to lift. Jaden, with a deep breath, opened the car door and slid inside, casting one last glance toward the pool. What once held a sense of discomfort now stood as a symbol of his inner strength and the unwavering support of his mother, an experience that, while challenging, revealed to him the profound power of resilience and the importance of community. This moment serves as a poignant reminder of the vital need to stand against injustice and champion equality within our communities. It shows us that our actions, whether in the heat of conflict or in moments of quiet reflection, have the potential to either perpetuate harm or spark the change we long to see. As the car slowly pulled away, one thing became crystal clear. Even in the darkest of times, there is immense strength to be found in unity and the fight for what is just. In those challenging moments, the courage to rise, speak out, and seek justice not only lifts those directly affected, but also has the power to ignite change in those who witness it. It is in these moments that we truly understand the power of empathy, the importance of understanding one another, and our collective duty to build a world where dignity and respect are extended to all.